Greetings. This is Astrology 303, Locational Astrology, and I'm your host, Seth Roback. We are going to discuss an introduction to relocation charts. Through relocation charts, we will show the places I lived and their effects on me, provide an introduction to astrocartography, and discuss planetary lines and intersections on a world map. Introduction to the relocation chart. It is the same as drawing up a regular birth chart, except that you change the birth location to the new location. The angles in the houses shift. Planets conjunct the angles or cluster in a particular house. The following slides log the different places I lived in the United States and the effect these places had on me. I was born in Southern California and grew up to about age 15 when we moved from there. And in California, that's my birth chart, the significant points on it are Neptune conjuncting ascendant and opposition to Saturn conjuncting the ascendant. So there's this Neptune Saturn opposition that are pushing and pulling against each other. So it describes my early childhood environment. I came in this world unexpectedly while parents were divorcing. So it was a rough time at the time that I started my life. You know, sort of the Saturn hardship of relationships and the Neptunian idealism that fell. So at this time there was a cluster of planets of Moon, Jupiter, and Neptune in the 12th house of spirituality. I spent a lot of time in meditation ashrams. Well, since the age of 4, I would say, my mother used to take me to them, and then I practiced a lot on my own. So that's kind of like the hanged man. He's sort of in a meditative state, but you could look at that different ways, of course. So then, in 1986, we moved to the East Coast from about age 15 to 18, so I finished up high school in the East Coast. My Moon and Jupiter and Neptune are now in the 10th house. So what this means is, my identity and things that were shaping about me were very much tied into my mother, and she was involved in politics for a particular time, the League of Women Voters, and I can see how the Moon, being my mother, takes the center stage in the 10th house and the work she's trying to do in the world at that time. She was part of the Hunger Project that was trying to eliminate hunger worldwide, which again is a very Neptunian idealistic and large global perspective of Jupiter, trying to help the world. So, I helped out and participated, and so it was what we did. So now, looking at another aspect is the Sun was conjunct the descendant. So, again, I was very attached to my mother at the time, she, a single child living with a single mom. She was involved in a lot of spiritual and personal empowerment programs, similar to the West Coast as well. She remarried and divorced again, which influenced my views of relationship. So the spiritual practices were always a buffer against, the heartbreak that was kind of surrounding us, both in the West Coast and the East Coast. So you can see that here with the tower. So then I moved to the Midwest to go to college from age 18, starting at age 18, and I resided there up until age 33, so from 1989 to 2004. So in the Midwest, Chiron is conjunct my Imam Koli, which means wherever Chiron is, I haven't discussed Chiron in other videos, but Chiron usually is a planet that represents the wounded healer. So it's where you suffer hardship, but through that hardship you can help other people with their hardships. So I struggled desperately. You know, this was me going out into the world, and I was, you know, trying to get some foundation and stability, but it just wasn't happening there. You know, it was a very hard struggle. So then there was Venus, Sun, and Mercury in the 7th house, so a huge emphasis in relationships. I put most of my focus on relationships, which end up backfiring on me. I had traumatic relationships, so I didn't invest enough in myself and my own foundation of support, so, you know, the tower was crumbling in the Midwest. So, but on the other hand, Uranus conjunct the midheaven was a time when I studied computers to get a career in computer networking. So, you know, this new talent emerged. And Moon, Jupiter, and Neptune were in the 11th house, ruled by Aquarius. So I developed a lot of friendships that, you know, that made it much better for me than the difficulties with relationship and that sort of thing. So anyways, so then at age 33 I moved to the Pacific Northwest, to Seattle area, where Saturn is conjunct the descendant. I became cynical about relationships. It was very hard for me to meet people, and I started to get involved in online dating, and that was difficult, but I was determined. Saturn is about hard work. I really wanted a good relationship. And so I learned to develop realistic expectations and found my enduring life partner, you know, through thick and thin. You know, before it was just, you know, just through the thick times I would have partners, and then, you know, when times got tough, it wasn't so easy to hold on to relationships. So eventually we all get older and need someone there. I mean, that's not why we're with them, but, you know, that we support each other, and that's in a relationship that endures. So then there's also a Venus, Sun, Mercury in the 8th house up in the Pacific Northwest, which the 8th house has me draw strength and self-realization through my inner resources. So when I was in the Midwest, those planets were in the 7th house of relationship. So having them move into the 8th house, I turned my attention and my sense of identity inward instead of outward to other people. My identity is hidden and mysterious. Well, that goes without saying. So now we're going to look at the Moon, Jupiter, Neptune conjunct the ascendant. So this is what I think was really, the ascendant I see as the strongest of the angles, and that it shows you what you're really moving towards in life. And so my life is occupied with growing family and mystical pursuits, like these astrology videos, and, you know, using myself and my history and my relationships to family as examples of how it all fits together. So let's talk about astrocartography. Below is a map of what a printout looks like. You can get one of these free if you go to astro.com, and it's in the horoscope section. There's a travel horoscope, but basically it prints out your planetary lines you can do it on a world map or on any of the continents. I'm just showing it on the world map because it's pretty cool. And so it shows your birth position. So this was at the time of birth, what the planets, what they look like from different points of view. So the vertical lines represent locations where planets conjunct the midheaven or Imam Coli. So in the case of my birth chart, we'll just use Venus as an example. And Venus is produces beauty and luxury and that sort of thing. Imam Coli has to do with home. So what I see here is, that line is very close to Iceland. So that would be a place where I might have such a thing, attract a beautiful home or have, a beautiful environment that I lived in, which I would guess would be in Iceland anyways. I've always wanted to go there. So then there's also those wavy lines you saw that represent locations where planets conjunct the ascendant or the descendant. So you can see where those lines, when it goes over the hump there, it switches from the descendant to the ascendant. So if I go to any of these locations on this line at the time of my birth, I would have saw Venus right on the ascendant or right on the descendant, if that makes any sense. So then in Turkey, which is where the ascendant line goes through, conjuncts my ascendant, improving my look. So there I would, Venus goes into, I would spend time maybe learning art or, developing my day-to-day pursuits in music and art and that sort of thing, and kind of getting a beautiful image of myself, since that's what the ascendant rules. And then there's the planetary lines that intersect where planetary influences merge like an aspect. So what you see here is Pluto on the midheaven line crossing over the descendant line, where Venus would be on the descendant. So Venus on the descendant has to do with some relationship usually, or attraction to a female relationship. So what you see here is, in my birth chart, I have a square between Pluto and Venus, which makes oftentimes for kind of a fatalistic relationship that occurs there, which, at that location, I was involved with a woman in Acapulco, in that area, Cuernavaca, Acapulco, where Venus and Pluto intersect. Now, those are very sexual planets. So there was an intense drive at that time. Also, I was fairly young. This resulted in a tragic relationship and the birth of my daughter, which wasn't planned. So it was difficult to be in a tough relationship like that. However, she turned out to be a blessing in my life. So, from this sort of nefarious place, comes new life, new hope, which is often what Pluto does, is regeneration, rejuvenation. At that time, I was pretty depressed about who I was and relationships and things like that, and it was in my early 20s, and so then comes this magnificent person into my life. So my final thoughts are, your relocated chart can show the results of traveling or moving to another location. Generally, you need to be there for a little while, at least a month or two, preferably 6 months, to really see the effect of that location. A relocated chart shows the effect of moving to a new place. So, the main focus is the effect of going there. It does not change the effects of the birth chart with its angles and houses. So your main birth chart tells everything about you in your life. All the lessons, all the houses have to do with, where the planetary energies apply themselves in your day-to-day life. So that stays the same regardless of a relocated chart. The main thing to look for in a relocated chart are changes from the birth chart, and that shows you, by moving here it's going to have more of that effect, but you're not going to lose the effects of the original birth chart. So then there's astrocartography, which show planetary lines across an entire map, so you can look at where you could travel to have those effects in one glance. The lines are based on conjunctions to your angles in a relocation chart. So astrocartography is like a whole bunch of relocation charts spread out across the map, mainly focusing on the angles. Where lines intersect are similar to aspects and show specific effects of certain locations. So between relocation charts and astrocartography, you can plan ideal locations in which to move, or look at the effects of your history at different locations. It's a great way to practice astrology, is to do what I just did if you've moved or lived different places. Now, relocation charts and astrocartography doesn't have much impact unless you've moved over 1,000 miles, north, south, east, or west. So if you just moved a short distance, you're not going to see much effect in that case. So thank you very much.